Arsène Lupin 813 series, episode 5, The Choice and the Sacrifice. Welcome back, Detective. The assassinations are prevented, the peace treaty signed, Europe saved from war. But for Arsène Lupin, the hardest part begins now, living with what he became to prevent what could have been. Today's finale asks the question that's haunted this entire series. When you sacrifice your soul to save millions, what's left of you afterward? Prepare for an ending where victory and defeat are the same thing. Picture this: August 1910, 1 month after Brussels. Lupin sits in a safe house on the outskirts of Paris, recovering from physical injuries sustained during his escape. But the deeper wounds, psychological, moral, spiritual, show no signs of healing. He stares at newspapers celebrating the Brussels peace treaty, reading about diplomatic triumph while knowing the truth. Peace was purchased with his descent into evil. Inspector Ganimard visits with complicated news. The French government wants to acknowledge your role in preventing the assassinations. Quietly, unofficially, but still, recognition. They're offering a pardon for your previous thefts in exchange for your testimony against 813 members we've captured. You'd have immunity, legitimacy, a chance to start fresh. Think about this offer, my apprentice. Everything Lupin has ever wanted as a criminal: freedom from prosecution, official sanction, the ability to operate openly. The French state is offering to transform him from outlaw to asset, from criminal to unofficial agent. All he has to do is accept that what he did in Brussels was justified, that his moral compromises were worthwhile, that the ends truly did justify the means. But Lupin's response shocks Ganimard. No, I don't want their pardon. I don't want their recognition. What I did in Brussels wasn't heroic. It was necessary evil that I chose to commit. Accepting a pardon means accepting that I was right to become what I became. I wasn't right, I was just less wrong than the alternative. He pauses, his voice hollow. I'm still a criminal, I just happened to be one who prevented a war. Think about this refusal, detective. Most people would seize the opportunity for redemption, for transformation from villain to hero. But Lupin recognizes that accepting external validation would be denying his own internal truth. He crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed, even for good reasons. He's not seeking absolution, he's living with accountability. Sherlock Sholmes arrives from London with his own complicated message. The British government has quietly recommended you for knighthood. Obviously impossible since you're French and technically a criminal. But the sentiment matters. They want you to know you saved not just lives, but civilization itself. Preventing that war prevented the cascade of alliances and mobilizations that would have devastated Europe. But Scholz's personal message is different. I've spent my career catching criminals by understanding their psychology. And I've learned something troubling: the difference between criminals who help society and heroes who break laws is mostly perspective. You're still wanted for dozens of thefts. You still live outside legitimate authority. What happened in Brussels doesn't erase what you are, it just complicates it. It's Sholmes acknowledging what they both know. Lupin's sacrifice doesn't transform his criminal nature. It just adds heroic complexity. He's both thief and savior, both lawbreaker and peacekeeper. The categories that society uses to classify people, good or evil, legal or criminal, hero or villain, simply don't accommodate someone like Arsène Lupin. But the deepest wounds come from personal relationships destroyed by his infiltration. Senator Legrasse, whose political career Lupin sacrificed to maintain his cover, visits with devastating honesty. I agreed to let you ruin my reputation because you said it would prevent war, and it did. The Brussels Treaty was signed, peace was preserved, but I'm still destroyed. My colleagues call me a coward. My constituents recall me. My family bears the shame. I kept my promise, Lupin says quietly. I told Inspector Ganimard the truth. He can clear your name, explain you were helping prevent 813's conspiracy. But Legrasse shakes his head bitterly. Explain how? That I let a criminal use me as cover while infiltrating assassins. That I pretended to capitulate to threats that didn't exist. Every explanation makes me look worse, either a coward or a fool who trusted a thief. Think about this tragic consequence, my apprentice. Lupin used Legrasse exactly as 813 would have manipulated him. Sacrificed his reputation, treated him as a strategic asset rather than a human being. The fact that Lupin's ultimate goal was good doesn't change the harm he caused. Legrasse's life is ruined, and Lupin's noble intentions don't rebuild destroyed reputations. I'm sorry, is all Lupin can offer. I used you to stop something worse. That doesn't make it right. It just makes it the choice I made. Legrasse stands to leave. And his final words cut deep. You asked me to trust that you were different from 813, that you had honor even as a criminal. But when the stakes were high enough, you used the same methods they would have: manipulation, deception, sacrifice of innocence. Maybe you're not as different as you think. The accusation haunts Lupin because it's partially true. He did use 813's methods. He did manipulate and deceive. The only difference was his final betrayal, his ultimate choice to sabotage rather than facilitate. But everything before that moment, indistinguishable from genuine participation in conspiracy. The line between infiltrating evil and becoming evil is thinner than he ever imagined. More visitors arrive over the following days, each representing a relationship damaged by his Brussels operation. The Countess de Crécy, whose jewel exhibition he used as a sting operation years ago, visits with quiet disappointment. I defended you to society, insisted you were a gentleman thief with principles. Then I learned you terrorized a senator, coordinated assassinations, became everything you claimed to oppose. Was I wrong to believe in you? Lupin has no good answer. You weren't wrong about who I was. But Brussels required me to become someone else. Temporarily, I thought. Just a role I'd play, then discard. But roles have a way of becoming real when you inhabit them long enough. I don't know if I successfully returned to being the man you believed in. Or if that man died in Brussels and someone else walked away. Think about this identity crisis. Detective Lupin spent weeks as Armand Devereux, 813 operative. He thought like them, spoke like them, planned like them. Even while intending betrayal, he genuinely participated in conspiracy. Can someone do that without being changed fundamentally? Can you successfully pretend to be a monster without becoming one? The most painful visit comes from Grimald, the fence who introduced Lupin to 813. He arrives, not with judgment, but with understanding. I know you betrayed them. I know you were infiltrating from the start. And I know you probably think that makes you different from those of us who genuinely joined. He pauses significantly. But here's what you don't understand. We all told ourselves we were just pretending at first. That we'd take their money, use their resources, then walk away when convenient. The difference is I walked away, Lupin insists. But Grimald shakes his head. The difference is you were forced to reveal yourself. If that poisoned plate hadn't slipped through your sabotage, if you hadn't needed to cause that scene, would you have continued your infiltration? Would you have kept playing Armand Devereux, kept enjoying 813's protection and resources, kept telling yourself it was temporary? It's a question Lupin can't honestly answer. Think about the terrible possibility, my apprentice. What if the only thing that made Lupin betray 813 was circumstance rather than character? What if, given different conditions, he might have continued his infiltration indefinitely, slowly forgetting which identity was real. But amidst all these damaged relationships, one remains intact. Sherlock Holmes, before leaving for London, offers unexpected solidarity. I've been thinking about our years as adversaries. You broke laws, I enforced them. Simple, clear, morally comfortable, but Brussels revealed something more complex. Sometimes enforcing legitimate authority means enabling evil, and sometimes breaking laws means serving justice. You're saying I was right to do what I did? Lupin asks hopefully, but Holmes's response is more nuanced. I'm saying reality is messier than our categories allow. You were both right and wrong, both heroic and criminal, both justified and culpable. The question isn't whether you are absolutely good or absolutely bad, it's whether you can live with the complexity of being both. Think about this wisdom. Detective Holmes, the great detective who spent his career believing in clear moral categories, acknowledging that real human beings exceed those categories. Lupin isn't hero or villain. He's a complicated person who made terrible choices for defensible reasons. That doesn't resolve his moral status, it just describes his reality accurately. Inspector Ganimard provides the final assessment. The French government has classified the Brussels operation. Officially, 813 doesn't exist. The assassination attempts never happened, and your role never occurred. You're still wanted for your previous thefts. Nothing has changed legally. He pauses, then adds quietly, but everything has changed personally. I know what you did. I know what you sacrificed. And I know I couldn't have done it. Does that mean you'll stop pursuing me? Lupin asks with a ghost of his old humor. Ganimard actually smiles. It means when I pursue you, and I will, I'll do so with complicated respect. You're still a criminal. I'm still a detective. Our roles haven't changed. But our understanding of those roles has become more sophisticated. It's the most honest resolution possible. Lupin remains an outlaw. Ganimard remains his pursuer. But both now recognize that law and morality don't always align perfectly. Their adversarial relationship continues, but informed by mutual recognition of complexity rather than simple opposition. 2 months after Brussels, Lupin resurfaces in his familiar role. He steals a diamond necklace from a corrupt industrialist who's been defrauding workers. He leaves his calling card with a note stolen from a thief. The real crime was how you earned this. Consider it partial restitution. A.L. It's vintage Lupin, theatrical, morally justified theft, targeting the guilty rather than innocent. But something has changed. The theft feels hollow, mechanical, like going through familiar motions without genuine pleasure. The thrill he once felt from outsmarting security, from executing the perfect heist, from living outside society's rules, it's diminished somehow. Brussels has taught him that real stakes involve millions of lives, not individual fortunes. Stealing jewels feels trivial after preventing assassinations. Think about this loss. My apprentice, Lupin's greatest sacrifice wasn't his moral compromises during infiltration. It was losing the innocent joy he once took in being a gentleman thief. He can still commit crimes, but he can't experience them the same way. Brussels has made him too aware of real evil to fully enjoy playful criminality. He's been to the abyss, and it's changed how he sees everything. 6 months later, Lupin receives an unexpected letter. It's from Leonidas 813's coordinator, who escaped Brussels. Dear Monsieur Lupin, you betrayed us spectacularly. Admirable, really. We rarely encounter such effective infiltration. But you should know, 813 isn't finished. We've learned from Brussels, adapted our methods, recruited more carefully. The war you prevented will eventually come. Perhaps not this decade, but inevitably. History moves toward conflict regardless of individual intervention. Was your sacrifice worth it? You destroyed your moral identity, damaged relationships, lost your simple joy in being a criminal, all to delay the inevitable. We'll rebuild. We'll try again. And next time, we'll screen for infiltrators who think they can maintain dual identities. I wonder if you'll look back on Brussels as victory or futility. Either way, you've made the game more interesting. Respectfully, Eld. The letter is chilling because it's partially true. Think about the implications. Detective Lupin prevented one war through enormous personal sacrifice, but he didn't destroy the systemic forces pushing Europe toward conflict. 813 will rebuild. Similar organizations will emerge. The peace he preserved is temporary, and the costs he paid are permanent. Does that make his sacrifice futile? Or does preventing even temporary catastrophe justify the cost? How do you measure the value of years of peace against the loss of personal identity? These aren't abstract questions, they're Lupin's lived reality as he tries to find meaning in what he did. The series ends with Lupin standing on a bridge over the Seine, tearing Leonidas's letter into pieces and dropping them into the water. He watches the fragments float away, carrying with them the question of whether his sacrifice mattered. A young couple walks past, laughing, unaware how close they came to losing everything in a war that never happened. Lupin smiles slightly, his first genuine smile in months. They'll never know. The millions who would have died in trenches will live lives they don't realize were saved. The children who'll be born in peace instead of orphaned by war will never understand the alternative. That's the nature of prevention. Successful intervention creates a reality where the intervention seems unnecessary. Maybe that's enough, Lupin says quietly to himself. Maybe being an unrecognized guardian who operates outside law and morality, who sacrifices personal identity to serve the greater good, who lives with permanent moral ambiguity, maybe that's actually the highest form of honor. Not seeking glory, not demanding recognition, just doing what needs to be done and living with the consequences. So tell me, detective, after everything you've witnessed in this series, what's your verdict? Is Arsène Lupin ultimately hero or villain? The answer, if we're honest, is both and neither. He's a thief who prevented a war, a criminal who saved millions, a man who broke every law to serve justice. He's proof that human beings exceed our simple categories, that reality is more complex than our moral frameworks accommodate. Lupin is what he's always been, an outlaw operating by his own code. But now that code includes the knowledge that sometimes being a gentleman thief means becoming temporarily everything you oppose, sacrificing your moral purity for outcomes that matter more than personal integrity. It's a darker, more complex honor than the simple morality he started with. But perhaps it's more honest to. Inspector Ganimard, reading reports of Lupin's latest theft months later, shakes his head with complicated respect. He's still a criminal, still breaking laws, still evading justice. But he's a criminal who carries the weight of what he did in Brussels. That changes nothing legally and everything personally. I'll keep pursuing him. He'll keep evading me. But we both know the game is more complicated than simple cops and robbers. The final image, Lupin, alone in his apartment, looking at two objects on his desk. Von Kesselbach's original letter, tell him 813, he'll understand, and the fake credentials identifying him as Armand Devereux, 813, operative. The letter represents trust placed in him. The credentials represent what he became to honor that trust. He keeps both as reminders. The man who trusted him is dead. The identity he assumed is destroyed. But the choice he made to descend into evil to prevent greater evil, that choice defines him now more than any theft ever did. He's Arsène Lupin. Gentleman, thief, prevented a war, lost his innocence, saved his honor by sacrificing it. Is that heroism or tragedy? Victory or defeat? The only honest answer is yes.